Liam Whitlow didn't talk much, not since he was 18 and the world told him quiet men got left behind. He'd learned to live with that, learned to like the silence, or at least survive it. The floor creaked beneath his chair. The oil lamp hissed faintly beside him, casting light across dust floating like ghosts through the air. On the mantel sat a single photograph in a broken wooden frame, turned down. No one asked who was in it anymore, and Liam hadn't answered even when they did. He drank coffee so strong it bit the tongue and stared through the cracked window where the sky bruised itself into night. Coyotes cried far off. Somewhere, a rusted windmill moaned in protest, spinning slow like the memories he'd buried deep and quiet. There had been people once. Parents, a brother who vanished into a war that didn't take prisoners, a girl with cinnamon freckles and a braid that bounced when she laughed. But those were other lives now, lived by a version of himself who still hoped the world might welcome him back. A moth tapped against the glass. Liam didn't flinch. He just leaned back, folded his arms, and listened to the lonely sound of everything. No one had crossed his land in 5 weeks, not even the preacher or the sheriff, and he wasn't missed at church or at the general store. He had supplies, a mule-less wagon, a lame horse he couldn't ride far, and a pair of worn hands that knew how to mend fences but not what to do when a voice called his name. He woke before dawn, as always, when the air still held a trace of mercy. There was no rain in the sky, but the wind came heavy that morning, thick with grit and omen. Liam worked the fences, patched a hole in the chicken coop, and paused only once, when a hawk flew low across the field and dropped a black feather near his boot. He picked it up, turned it once between his fingers, then tucked it in his breast pocket without a word. That afternoon, the clouds built like grudges, the kind of sky that didn't just promise rain, it threatened it. He hitched the wagon to the old bay, more out of habit than need, and rode toward the canyon's edge to check the northern perimeter where wild dogs sometimes slipped through. It was near that bend, where the rocks huddled like elders keeping secrets, that he first saw them. 10 of them, 10 girls, young women really, draped in the shadows of willow trees near his upper field. Dust-covered, barefoot, some holding hands, others staring blankly toward nothing. They stood in silence like stones placed by wind, each one wearing clothes too thin for the evening chill. A few had shawls. One limped. Another clutched a cloth bundle close to her belly. Liam didn't reach for his rifle, though he felt the weight of it beside him. He just stared. They didn't run, didn't plead, didn't so much as blink. The oldest stepped forward, no taller than his shoulder, with long dark hair braided down her back and a fire behind her stillness. She said nothing, but her eyes held a question older than words. "Will you turn us away too?" He should have asked who they were, why they were here, where they came from. But questions felt too sharp for the softness of that moment. So he dismounted, stepped down into the dirt, and simply opened the back of the wagon. They climbed in without sound. No thanks, no begging. Just motion like wind over stone. The limping girl was helped up by 2 others, and the one with the bundle clutched it tighter, eyes darting from Liam's boots to the sky. The older girl remained standing until all the rest were inside. Then, and only then, did she climb up, never breaking his gaze. He turned the wagon slow back toward the house. No one spoke. The wheels creaked, the wind moaned, and Liam felt something like a weight slide into his chest. Not pain, not burden, just the unfamiliar gravity of presence. He wasn't used to being watched, or needed, or trusted. Back at the ranch, he led the wagon past the house and straight to the barn. Clean hay, dry blankets he used for wintering calves, water from the well and a loaf of bread he broke into uneven chunks. He didn't speak, neither did they. He lit the lantern on a hook and left them there, then walked back to the house alone. That night he sat in the dark again, beans untouched, the wind now stronger. Through the thin walls he could hear the faintest sounds, soft coughing, whispered humming, the rustle of straw beneath shifting limbs. He held his breath, just to listen better. For the first time in years, His house felt too quiet. He didn't sleep long. At some ghost hour between midnight and dawn, he woke and lit the lamp, the match shaking more than usual. He found himself standing at the window, watching the barn like it might vanish. His breath fogged the glass. He thought of the girl with the bundle. He thought of his mother's hands, brown and cracked from sun and soap, folding his shirts when he was too young to notice her sadness. He thought of a winter storm when he was 9, when his father carried in 3 orphans on his back and let them sleep in the root cellar for a week. His father hadn't spoken a word either. By morning, the wind had stilled. When he stepped outside, the barn door creaked open from the inside, and the eldest girl stepped out barefoot. She wore one of his old coats, sleeves too long, dragging slightly in the dust. In her hands was a small flat stone, smooth and round. She walked to the porch and placed it gently near the door, then turned back without a word. Liam stared at the stone. It wasn't ordinary. Painted on it, in faint ochre and blue, were 2 shapes, one large, one small, sheltered under a faded triangle like a roof. It was a picture, simple and ancient. Shelter, belonging. He didn't pick it up, just stood there as the morning sun pushed over the ridge like a blessing no one dared ask for. At noon, he brought them more bread, more water, a hammer and nails for the loose boards in the barn. One of the younger girls took the hammer and fixed the door herself. The others smiled faintly. Not at him, but among each other. That was enough. He didn't ask how long they meant to stay. He didn't ask where they'd go. That evening, he found himself humming. Not loud, not anything recognizable. Just a thread of sound curling up from memory. Something his mother used to sing when folding quilts by firelight. He caught himself doing it while fixing the gate, embarrassed for a moment. But then he saw one of the girls listening nearby, head tilted, and for the first time in decades, he didn't stop. When the stars came, they came in thousands. The girls lay scattered like shadows across the barn hay, curled beside each other. One of them, the youngest, laughed in her sleep. A soft, high sound like a bell lost in fog. Liam leaned against the barn wall, alone but not entirely. Something had changed. Not spoken, not named, but changed. The photograph on his mantel still sat turned down. He thought, briefly, of turning it over again. But not yet. Not until he knew the names of the girls who'd crossed his land without asking, and carved space for themselves in his silence. And as he stood there in the night, coat wrapped tight and the desert breathing slow around him, he realized it wasn't the girls who'd come looking for shelter. Maybe it was him. The road to town stretched long and flat, a ribbon of dust and forgotten prayers. Liam Whitlow rode it slow, the reins held light in his calloused grip, the old bay horse limping gently with each step. He hadn't gone into town in nearly 4 months. It didn't miss him, and he hadn't missed it either, not really. But the barn now held 10 mouths to feed, and his stores were running thin. The town of Sycamore Ridge rose like a memory out of the heat. Whitewashed storefronts, a leaning chapel steeple, and a main street so narrow the wind barely fit between its teeth. Liam felt the eyes before the boots hit the ground. He tethered his horse outside Hanley's Mercantile and stepped into the shade like a man who'd been ghost too long to remember what it meant to cast one. Inside, the smell of oats, dust, and sour tobacco clung to the shelf. Behind the counter, Levi Hanley, skin as thin as dried apple peel, raised his brows the way only a man surprised by the living could. "Well, I'll be. You wandered in off the edges." Liam grunted. "Need flour, salt, dried meat. Enough for," he paused, voice catching like it hadn't used itself in weeks. "Enough for 12. Levi leaned forward. "You expecting a party, Bo?" Liam didn't answer, just tapped the counter once, and Levi, knowing better than to dig, nodded and got to work. But Sycamore Ridge didn't run on silence. Outside, Miss Luann Trask stood on the porch of her church-sponsored charity store, lacy gloves and sharpened eyes watching every passerby like she'd been tasked with moral census. She saw Liam. She saw the bags he loaded. And more importantly, she saw the quantity. 2 sacks of flour, 6 tins of beef, a roll of fabric, soap, needles. By noon, the words had begun their slow crawl down the boardwalks. Liam Whitlow's feeding a house full. By supper, the sentence had taken root. He's got girls out there. 10 of them. Navajo. That night, as Liam chopped kindling near the porch, Nita came from the barn carrying a tin basin. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows, wrists thin but sure. She set the basin down on the steps, nodded once, and walked back. She didn't speak. He didn't ask. But there was something different in the way her braids swung as she moved. Less wary, more certain, like a doe that stopped flinching at every sound. In the morning, the sheriff came. Dal Barlow didn't knock. He never did. Just stepped off his sorrel horse and stood in the yard with his thumbs hooked in his belt like law was something you wore casual. Liam met him on the porch. "Morning, Bo," Dal said, voice even but weighty. "Dal, you got visitors." Liam said nothing. Dal gestured with his chin toward the barn. "Town's talking. Says you've taken in 10 girls. Yum. Navajo. No guardians. No papers. Just showed up. They were cold," Liam said. "Not the question. They were hungry. That's not the question either." The silence between them stretched like fence wire. Liam didn't break it. Eventually, Dal scratched at his stubble and sighed. "I'm not here to make trouble. Just need to know if it's true." Liam nodded once. Dal looked past him toward the barn, where a wisp of smoke curled gently from the chimney pipe the girls had rigged with cloth and tin. "Bo, you know how this town is." "I do." "Then you know this won't sit right. Not with Luann. Not with the Ladies' Guild. Not with the ones who still believe blood matters more than kindness." Liam's jaw tightened. "They're not hurting anyone." "No, but they're brown. And they're girls. And you," Dal sighed. "You've always scared the town a little. Living out here with ghosts." Liam turned his head. "I don't care what scares them." Dal paused, then said quieter, "I know. But it's not about you caring. It's about what they'll do because they're scared." The sheriff left without further warning. Dust swirled behind his horse like a whisper being taken back too late. That week, the girls worked, not because they were asked, but because they could not sit still. Nita mended the broken hinge on the chicken coop. Ruthie rigged a rain barrel from old sheet metal. 2 younger ones made wreaths from dry sage and hung them around the barn like blessings. One night, Liam found his porch swept clean and his boots, mud-caked for months, resting neatly side by side beside the door. Still, the distance remained. He brought them bread, they left him carved tokens. He fixed a fence post, they braided rope. Conversations were rare, eyes softer. But no one stepped too close, until one evening, when Ruthie approached him while he sat whittling on the porch. She didn't speak right away, just stood watching the curls of wood fall to the dirt. Finally, she asked, "Why'd you let us stay?" Liam didn't look up, didn't see a reason not to. "That's not an answer." He sighed. "Because someone once opened a door for me when I needed it. That's all." Ruthie nodded. "Town thinks we're bad girls." He met her eyes then. Town's been wrong before. The next day, the real trouble came. It started with a knock on the door. Not from Dow, from Miss Luann Trask, dressed in her Sunday hat even though it was Tuesday, holding a clipboard like it was the word of God. "Liam Whitlow," she began before even crossing the threshold. "We've convened the ladies for decency council, and I'm here as a representative of community virtue." Liam stared at her. "You're not stepping inside." She stiffened. "I don't intend to. I just came to deliver this." She held out the clipboard. A petition, signed by 47 members of Sycamore Ridge. "We request that you surrender the girls to town custody. They're not prisoners. They're unsupervised females of questionable origin living on a single man's land. You must admit the appearance alone. I don't care what it looks like." "Well, appearances matter." Liam didn't move. Luann's lips thinned. "They're not your responsibility. They are now. They could be trafficked, runaways, or worse, pregnant. They're people. Luann's nostrils flared. You think you're noble, but you're dragging your name through the mud, and them with you. He looked past her, toward the barn. One of the younger girls waved from the loft. Liam didn't wave back, but his throat tightened. You'll have until the end of the week, Luann snapped. Then we take it to Judge Parsons. You'll be cited for harboring fugitives and endangering minors. That'll be the kindest reading of it. When she left, Liam burned the petition in the stove without reading a single name. That night, he brought firewood to the barn and lingered longer than usual. The girls sat in a circle, sewing patches into a quilt made from rags and burlap. They had no light except the oil lamp, but their hands worked smooth and confident. One of them hummed a lullaby. Nita looked up. What did the town say? Liam hesitated. Then, they want you gone. Will you send us? No. She didn't thank him. Just returned to the stitching. That meant more. Later, while closing the barn doors against the chill, he heard someone behind him. You'll lose your land, Ruthie whispered. Maybe. They'll say things. They already do. She stepped beside him, a little closer than usual. Why are you risking so much? Liam looked out into the night. Because I know what it feels like to knock on a door and not be let in. Neither of them spoke for a long time. By the week's end, the town sent another letter, formal this time. Sheriff Dow brought it, cheeks pink with shame. I don't agree with them, he muttered. But if it comes to court, they'll win. Liam nodded, folded the letter, placed it on the fire without a word. You could just send them to the mission home. Say they wandered on your land and you were being decent. Liam looked up. Would you? Dow didn't answer. Just tipped his hat and rode off slow. That evening, something shifted. The girls didn't eat in the barn. They came, one by one, to the porch. Liam had left biscuits and stew on a table, expecting silence. But Nita carried the youngest girl up the steps and sat beside him. Ruthie followed, holding a tin cup of coffee she offered without a word. They didn't speak much, but they sat, and the space between them wasn't silence. It was something softer, like shared memory, like family. Liam looked up once and saw a star fall across the sky. He didn't make a wish. He already had 10. It began with the smallest sign, a note nailed crooked on the church door. No signature, no handwriting anyone claimed. Just 7 words carved into the paper in angry, nail-deep strokes. Whitlow's Ranch harbors sin. Stop it now. By morning, the rumor had bloomed like sickness. In the saloon, they passed it along with drink. At the general store, Levi Hanley swore he'd seen 2 of the girls holding hands and laughing behind the hay barrels. Miss Luann declared it a nest of temptation, while Mrs. Granger from the sewing circle called it unholy hospitality. Sheriff Dow hadn't spoken publicly, but word was he'd been called to prepare a town meeting, an unofficial vote about what to do. Liam heard about the paper from a boy delivering grain, but he didn't read it. He just nodded once and returned to shoeing the lame bay mare, knuckles blackened with dust and iron. He didn't tell the girls, but they felt it. They always had. Nita said nothing, but began sweeping the porch twice a day. Ruthie stopped humming while she worked. Even the younger ones, wild and playful before, now clung closer to the barn walls, whispering only when they thought no one heard. They'd seen this before, in border towns, at river camps, behind cracked doors with locked hearts, silence before the storm. Liam cooked more often, though his food was plain. He brought it out to them without comment. Warm beans, coarse bread, boiled potatoes. Each time, a different girl would nod, offer a piece of something in return. A carving, a flower, a mended glove. A language was being built, slowly, of gesture and offering. But the air thickened. The sky began to watch. It was Wednesday evening when the letter came, rolled and sealed with red wax. Fancy, formal, the kind of letter meant to be read aloud and obeyed. Sheriff Dow rode in near dusk, jaw tight. Liam met him in the yard. It's from the council, Dow muttered, eyes low. They're calling it a civic inquiry. says you're required to bring the girls into town. For questioning. For placement. Liam took the letter but didn't open it. Dal hesitated. They're planning to make it public. Open square. People be watching. For what? For guilt. Or spectacle. Or both. They want me to hand him over. They want to be seen deciding. Doesn't matter what you say. Liam looked to the barn. Lantern light glowed soft through the cracks in the boards. The sound of low laughter, brief like a spark. Then silence again. He nodded. We'll come. The next morning dawned colder than usual, sky pressed tight with iron light. Liam hitched the wagon slow. The girls came out dressed in what they had, simple shawls, patched skirts, and eyes that held neither panic nor peace, just the steadiness of those who've walked through worse and survived. Nita climbed up beside Liam without a word. Ruthie stood at the back, hands resting lightly on the youngest girl's shoulders. The rest filled the bed of the wagon like whispered prayers. No one spoke as they entered Sycamore Ridge. The town square had been cleared. Church pews dragged outside. Folding chairs. A little wooden platform hammered together just that morning. Men stood with their arms folded. Women with lips pressed thin. Children clung to their mothers, watching as if expecting a show. Miss Luann waited near the front, a Bible in one hand, a folded petition in the other. Judge Parsons stood stiffly on the platform, robes dusted but ironed. Liam helped each girl down from the wagon, one by one. He didn't hurry. He didn't meet their eyes either. His jaw worked silently like he was chewing something bitter. They stood in a line, 10 of them. Small hands, quiet shoulders, hair braided or loose or bound in kerchief. No two alike, but they stood together. Nita stepped forward first. Where do you want us? No one answered. Judge Parsons cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen of Sycamore Ridge, we are gathered today to address a troubling concern, a matter of propriety, legality, and decency. Mr. Liam Whitlow, a resident of our town, has, according to numerous accounts, housed 10 young women of Navajo descent without legal sanction or formal guardianship. We ask today not in malice, but in duty. The crowd shifted. Murmurs like rustle through corn. Miss Luann stepped forward. Liam, we gave you time. Gave you warning. This isn't personal. But these girls don't belong here. They need structure. Civilization. Separation. Nita turned, voice calm. We don't need charity. We needed shelter. And we were given it. Luann's eyes narrowed. And what were you planning to give in return? Nita didn't flinch. Our work, our hands, our silence. Someone near the front laughed, short, mocking. Liam stepped forward then, boots grinding gravel. They didn't ask me for anything, he said. Not once. Didn't even knock on the door. They just sat in the dirt, quiet, waiting to be turned away. Judge Parsons raised a brow. And you invited them in? No. I opened the barn. They walked in themselves. And why didn't you report it? Because I saw what they needed, and it wasn't paperwork. There was a silence, then a voice from the back. You think you're some kind of hero, Whitlow. Liam looked toward the sound but said nothing. Parsons spoke again, gentler now. Liam, the law exists for protection, for process. If they have no names in our books, they have no place in our world. They've got names, Liam said louder. They've got names and stories and hands that mend better than any woman I've ever known. They've got hearts full of more grace than I've seen in this town in 20 years. Luann stepped forward. You're embarrassing yourself. Liam turned to her, voice calm. You think I care about embarrassment? I lived alone since I was 18. Nobody asked why. Nobody cared if I ate or breathed or broke inside my own walls. And now that my table's full, now that there's laughter near the porch, you come and call it shame. No one moved. Nita placed a hand on Liam's arm. You don't have to. He shook his head gently. I do. Then, slowly, the 10 girls stepped forward. And one by one, they knelt. Not in fear. Not in submission. But in quiet defiance. knees in the dust, heads high, shoulders back, 10 flames unbowed by wind. The crowd gasped. Miss Luann dropped her clipboard. And then Ruthie said, just loud enough, we won't go back. You may take us, but we won't forget who opened the door. Judge Parsons looked stunned. This isn't proper conduct. Nita lifted her chin. Neither is kindness, sometimes. From the platform, Sheriff Dow cleared his throat. Loud, deliberate. I've seen no crime here, he said slowly. Only hospitality. And a town too scared of its own reflection. Parsons opened his mouth to protest, but Dow stepped down from the platform, took off his badge, and placed it in Liam's hand. You'll probably need this more than me. Then he turned and walked away. The crowd parted like water. Luann stared, mouth tight, eyes hard. But she didn't speak again. No one did. Liam looked down at the badge in his hand, then at the girls kneeling like pillars of salt and strength. He didn't know what came next, but he knew what mattered now. As the sun dipped westward, casting long gold shadows through the dust, Nita rose to her feet and said softly, "We're not your secret anymore." And Liam, voice breaking for the first time in years, replied, "No, you're my stand." And all 10 girls stood behind him. The days that followed felt like a breath let out after holding it too long. The girls returned to the ranch not as fugitives but as something closer to kin, unspoken, unclaimed, but understood. The town didn't apologize. They never would. But the whispers died down, and the tension loosened like bootlaces after a long ride. Sheriff Dow didn't come back, but his badge still sat on the kitchen shelf, polished now, its leather backing stitched by Ruthie's hands. The wind softened. The porch no longer creaked in loneliness, only in rhythm with laughter, mending, footsteps, and the occasional clatter of tin mugs passed hand to hand. Liam began building a long table outside under the old cottonwood. Nothing fancy, just good planks fitted tight. The girls helped him sand it smooth. The youngest painted flowers along the sides in crude but joyful stroke. A table meant for gathering, meant to last. Nita worked beside Liam often now. Not every day, not every chore, but enough. She'd come without being called, quietly tying her braid back, rolling her sleeves, lifting one end of a board while he measured the other. Their words were few, their silences long but companionable. He began leaving a second cup of coffee out on the porch rail in the morning. She never asked for it, never missed it. Liam watched her one afternoon, kneeling by the garden plot she'd carved from the dry earth with her own hands. Her fingers moved with certainty, burying seeds like blessings, brushing soil like she trusted it to remember what to become. The sun caught in her braid, and something unnameable stirred in his chest. Not heat, not ache, but that quiet thing that grows when a man sees life blooming where once there was only ash. The other girls started to make plans. 2 would leave to join cousins across the range. One was betrothed to a craftsman in Window Rock. Another had found work tending goats with a widow south of the canyon. They came to Liam one by one, asking his thoughts, his blessing. Ruthie was the last to go before the turning point. She stood in the doorway with her satchel, staring at him longer than was comfortable. "You never asked us anything," she said. "Not our past, not our pain. Didn't seem like mine to ask." She nodded. "That's why we stayed as long as we did." He handed her a pouch of jerky. "You're fierce. That won't always be easy." "I know," she said, and then added with a faint smile, "Neither are you." After she left, it was just Liam and Nita. Not that it was spoken, not that anything had changed, but everything had. She took to cooking in the evenings, using wild herbs and things she foraged with unerring instinct. He still chopped wood, still fixed things that didn't need fixing, but his hands didn't shake so much now, and his shoulders didn't feel so tight come nightfall. The old house began to feel lived in. The dust didn't settle the same. One night, lightning stitched the sky, and rain fell sudden and loud. Liam stood at the barn door, watching it slice the fields clean. Nita came to stand beside him, her shawl pulled over her head, cheeks damp but unbothered. My mother used to say, she murmured, that rain was the sky washing its face after dreaming too long. Liam didn't answer right away. Then, I used to pray for storms. They were the only thing louder than my thoughts. Nita looked at him. Really look. Are they quieter now? He met her gaze. Some. And that was all. Until the letter came. It was delivered by a rider. No one from town, just a traveler paid to pass word. The paper was creased and smudged, but the message clear. A Navajo family had heard of the 10 girls, heard one might be their daughter. The girl, Sadi, quiet and brown-eyed, who rarely spoke above a whisper, read it and wept. She hadn't known they'd survive. She hadn't dared to hope. Nita helped her pack. Liam readied the wagon. When Sadi embraced them both, she cried so hard she couldn't say goodbye. Nita held her until she slept in the wagon bed, and Liam drove her west without a word. When he returned, the ranch was still. Nita was sitting on the porch steps, hands in her lap. She didn't stand as he approached, just turned slightly toward him. It's just us now, she said. Liam nodded. He didn't go inside, just sat beside her. The sky was all pink and gold, the way it got when the day didn't want to let go. She leaned against his shoulder, barely. A breath's weight. He didn't move. I could go too, she said, not asking, just saying. You could, he agreed. They sat like that for a long time, watching the sky fade. I don't want to, she said finally. Liam's voice was low. Then don't. She turned to look at him. Her eyes weren't hopeful. They were certain. You sure? I've been alone since I was 18, he said, staring ahead. I didn't think that was a wound. I thought it was how things were meant to be. But you, he stopped, shook his head. You planted a garden where I'd buried the gate. Nita smiled. The next morning, she unpacked her bag, hung her shawl on the same hook as his coat. She braided her hair different, looser with a red thread running through it. She still worked in the garden, still slept in the spare room, but something had settled between them, something like a promise. He built a second chair for the porch, sanded it smooth, carved a small sun at the top rail. She brought him mint tea in the evenings. They never called it love, never labeled anything, but he began humming more, and she began laughing when he did. One morning, she left a small carved bird on his plate. Liam picked it up, turned it over gently in his fingers, then looked at her. What's it mean? She shrugged. Means I stayed. He placed it on the windowsill. Later that week, a boy from town rode up with a message. They were building a new schoolhouse in Sycamore Ridge. They needed wood, labor, quiet men who didn't stir up politics. Sheriff Dow's old position was still empty. Liam didn't say yes or no. That night, he sat with Nita by the fire. They're offering a kind of return, he said. To what? He didn't answer. She leaned in. You don't need to be what they remember. I'm not. They'll try to make you. Let 'em try. She smiled. That's the man who opened the door. He stared into the fire a long while, then said, barely audible, I think I'd like to see you laugh in town. Nita chuckled, low and real. Then you'd better come with me. The wind stirred the embers. Outside, an owl called. Liam leaned back, let the silence hold him. Somewhere out there, the town waited. And beside him, something softer had finally stayed.